Welcome back, Courserians. It's Dr. Hale. I'm here to give you an update on week 3 of our Introduction to Pharmacy MOOC, which we are just completing. Before I do that, let me say that I know that there are many students in our course who observe the Chinese New Year or Lunar New Year. And to those students, and really to all of our students, let me say Happy New Year. I hope that the year of the horse will be a stampede of happiness and productivity for each and every one of you. Well, what does the pharmacist contribute to our healthcare system? And what career trajectories are available to enable these contributions? That's really what we've been studying this week. I've introduced you to a really useful tool called the APHA Career Pathway Evaluation Program for Pharmacy Professionals. I think if you will look at this tool and use it now and in the future, it can be helpful to you, whether you're interested in pharmacy or even some other field. Of course, they've introduced us through this tool to the vigilant career decision-making process. And let me remind you that that means appraising the challenge, assessing yourself. I think that's the most important piece of this model, surveying and evaluating alternatives, and achieving commitment. And if you'll go to their website, which is linked to our course homepage, you'll find, I think, a very useful online self-assessment tool that I encourage you to take. And there are 24 what they call career option profiles, which give you some in-depth look at several more career options that we'll be discussing in this course. So that one of the discussion forum questions this week, of course, was how can you be vigilant toward reaching your goals in this profession, or any profession for that matter? I encourage you to keep thinking about that as we go through our course. Well, this week we had, of course, a set of content videos. We looked at the APHA Career Pathway Evaluation Program as one of them. We talked about the essential roles and functions of the pharmacist, and I introduced you to something that actually one of my students brought to my attention several years ago, and that's the World Health Organization's 7-star pharmacist. I really like this concept because it makes us think about the essential roles of the pharmacist in kind of a non-functional way, more of kind of a philosophical and a kind of a 30,000-foot view way. So these, according to World Health Organization, are essential minimum common expectations of national healthcare systems worldwide. And I'll remind you that they talked about these 7 characteristics that are essential: caregiver, communicator, decision maker, leader, lifelong learner, manager, and teacher. I just like us to think about this profession in that way. And then we can get to the more kind of maybe pedantic functional things that pharmacists do as well. So one of our discussion forum questions this week is, what is the most essential role of the pharmacist? And we'll find out in a few minutes that was a pretty lively discussion. I'm going to share some of those thoughts with you, but I encourage you to keep thinking about that question as we go through the next several weeks. We studied medication therapy management this week. We've introduced that term to you a couple of times in the course. I think one of the really important concepts in contemporary pharmacy practice. I think it's one of the windows to the future. So I encourage you to pay attention to this one. And then within that module, we looked at the core elements of an MTM service, and we did this by video, and I also had you read, of course, this reading from APHA and NACDS that outlined this in some detail. And these 5 core elements being medication therapy reviews, personal medication records, medication action plan, intervention and referral, and documentation and follow-up. And I asked you in the discussion forum to think about how could a more substantial use of medication therapy management in patient care help change health outcomes. We'll continue that discussion here in just a few minutes. And then finally in our content, we looked at specialty administrative practices, and I introduced the pharmacy fundamental of Board of Pharmacy Specialties. I mean, did you know that there are 6 board certified specialties in pharmacy right now and 2 more coming in 2015? We learned that this week. And then we concluded with the important role of pharmacy technicians. And then in our guest practitioner interviews this week, we had 4 very different types of practitioners toward the goal of having you think about different career trajectories in this field. And we had Dr. Beatty, who is an ambulatory care specialist. We had Dr. Lehman, who works in inpatient practice. We had Dr. Thomas, who works in the pharmaceutical industry and health outcomes, and Dr. Zielinski, who works in a VA outpatient facility and has prescribing authority. So very different career pathways that can kind of open up some options for you in terms of how you think about this field. Well, we always give you web resources to learn more. I want to point out one of them to you today. This was a piece, an article, a document by Scott Gilbertson and co-authors called Improving Patient and Health System Outcomes through Advanced Pharmacy Practice, a report to the U.S. Surgeon General. This was produced in 2011, so it's a little bit dated, but still current, and a document that got a lot of airtime in our profession. I think if you'll pull that article down and download it and take a look at it, you'll see that it in a comprehensive and yet succinct way, makes a very good statement in terms of how pharmacists can help and how pharmacists are being underutilized in our current healthcare system. In the books you may find interesting this week, I introduced you to a book that I'm a big fan of. This is by Zlatic and Zelmer. It's published by the American College of Clinical Pharmacy. It's called Nourishing the Soul of Pharmacy, Stories of Reflection. And I would really encourage you to take a look at this book. I'm actually teaching an honors section, a live section of the course we're taking here at Ohio State this semester, and this is one of our required readings. It kind of reminds us why we wanted to be pharmacists and gets us back to this helping patients as the center of our practice. I think you'll find this book very interesting. Well, let's get to the discussion forums, and I'm going to highlight a few salient comments that were made in some of these forums. I'm not going to be really comprehensive as we think about it this week, but I want to share some comments that some of your peers have made and that you've been reacting to. So one of the threads was what led you to pharmacy and what can you do to be vigilant toward reaching your goals in this profession. Johnny Chen, 4 days ago, posted this. I grew up in a rural and poor region of Thailand that lacked in proper healthcare knowledge and practice. Just being around sickness all the time created this urge in me to learn how to protect my family and those around me. My grandfather used to practice Eastern medicine, and his knowledge inspired me at a very young age. To reach my goals, I should become more knowledgeable about pharmacy as a profession and what kind of academic journey it entails. Johnny, I thank you for posting this. I thank all of our international students for sharing and bringing to light different views in terms of the things we're discussing in this course. Your desire to help others, Johnny, is why you should be interested in a career such as pharmacy. And the 7-star pharmacist, as we've just talked about from World Health Organization, talks about the pharmacist enhancing his or her community through being a leader and a teacher and a communicative caregiver. This is much what I kind of read into what you were writing, Johnny. I hope this course will help you and others become more knowledgeable about this profession of pharmacy you're interested in, what kind of academic journey it entails. But you can also go farther by getting experience in the profession, by reading to learn more about the important issues in the field, and by engaging with others who are or wish to be pharmacy practitioners. So experience and engagement and reading. I encourage you to think about those mechanisms as well. Well, probably the most lively discussion thread this week was, what is the most essential role of the pharmacist? I really enjoyed reading all of your comments. Let me share just a few quick snippets of these. Isabella said, have an understanding of the patient's needs, prepare medication, advise patients, and follow up with them. Very succinct, but very comprehensive. Patricia O'Sullivan, I am struggling with finding a pithy answer to this question. There are so many important roles a pharmacist has, and those roles are expanding. After watching the video on MTM and watching Dr. Beatty's interview, I would have to say that the most important role a pharmacist has is advising the patient and the patient's healthcare team on medication therapy, including monitoring for adverse drug events and possible adverse interactions, monitoring the effectiveness of the medication therapy, improving patient adherence, and reducing patient cost. Well, you've hit several of our pharmacy fundamentals, Patricia. You've talked about adverse drug events and adherence, and many of the others in these postings have used those words in our pharmacy fundamental phrases as well. But I appreciate that you understand the importance of them in contemporary practice. Hannah Sadilo wrote this, I don't think that there is just one most essential role that a pharmacist carries out. It is a combination of being caring, committed, and providing the best treatment for the patient's individual needs. I like that. I think it sounds like 7-star pharmacist, caring, committed, providing the best treatment. Catherine Hudson, the most essential role of the pharmacist, in my opinion, is just patient safety. Medication safety should be the top priority. We'll get more to her point next week. And there was an anonymous post 3 days ago that the most essential role is to understand the patients. If you have all the knowledge on how to prepare and dispense medication and do not understand the consumer, all that knowledge is for naught. This reminds me of a phrase that I use a lot, and that is that I don't care how much you know until I know how much you care. So whoever wrote that one, I think you make a very good point. It's about caring, it's about knowing the patient. Well, as I've said before, I see a lot of the World Health Organization's 7-star pharmacist formula in your comments. So I encourage you to keep it up and keep sharing these kinds of ideas with your peers. The next thread I wanted to touch on with a few comments is how could a more substantial use of medication therapy management in patient care change health outcomes, and what will it take to make this happen? Tim Havakan wrote this 4 days ago. We are a grossly over-medicated society. Tim, I say that we're a drug-taking culture. Greg Kritzer used the phrase pharmaceutical populism. I think we're all hitting on the same thing. You say that we are a grossly over-medicated society. So MTM could save us substantial dollars and cents, and more importantly, free us from the paralyzing freak that someone or something is going to solve our problems. So we're going to empower the patient to take control of their own health care and wellness. I think that's what I got from your comment. Marnie Platt, at its best, medication therapy management will improve adherence, there's a pharmacy fundamental again, and reduce foreseeable adverse reactions, another fundamental. Thus shifting the individual patient's care from crisis management to prevention, moving us from crisis management to prevention. Well put. And then finally in this thread, Karen Bellotti wrote 4 days ago, a more substantial use of medication therapy management could improve continuity of care and patient outcomes. It would encourage patients to actively engage in their entire healthcare team instead of separating the doctor and the pharmacist. It would also decrease the number of adverse events and lower the $177 billion price tag associated with these events. I believe that this approach is starting to take root. Having an active patient base will always be the best way to expand care. Well, thank you all. I want you to hold these thoughts and continue this discussion as we learn more about the medication experience in the week to come. And finally, the last thread that I want to spend just a few seconds on here is how might the important role of pharmacy technicians evolve in pharmacy's future? Alicia Dale 5 days ago wrote this. Technicians will more likely take on more roles of dispensing and providing generalized instructions on how to take a medication and what actions or reactions to look for. Training will be more in-depth, and the work of technicians will evolve slowly but steadily to free up time for the pharmacist. Well, our Twitter question for this week was to tweet your perception of the most essential role of the pharmacist to @prof_Hale. I'd like to just share 3 of those tweets with you. Chicago Shazaro tweeted, pharmacy has evolved since the Shindar Cave era. It has become a holistic pathway to health care and improving clinical outcomes. So it's a holistic pathway to health care and improving clinical outcomes. Rawaya Wagu wrote, regulatory control and drug management, patient care, and processing prescriptions. And then finally, Johnny Malik tweeted, the most essential role of the pharmacist is caregiving to the patients by counseling them in a gentle manner. I love that. Caregiving by counseling in a gentle manner. Well, I think it's been a great week. I've enjoyed what you've written in the discussion forums. We're almost approaching the halfway point of our course, believe it or not. And this week, week 4, we're going to take a look at the very important issues surrounding the medication experience. The content for next week's material, week 4, will open at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on February 13th. And did you know that nearly half of all Americans take at least one prescription medication on a regular basis? Almost a third of them take 2 or more, and over 10% take 5 or more. So there's reason for us to think carefully about the medication experience, and because there are some consequences of these beyond health improvement that we need to be aware of. So stay tuned.